Thanks for coming. My name is Andy. I am half of Not Boring Software. And I thought I'd just spend some time talking about how we make software and go through some of the things that we've made, because it's maybe a little bit different. First, I want to tell a brief story about an American artist by the name of John Baldessari. So by his own definition, he would call himself a rather mediocre landscape painter for the first half of his life. Then at the age of 39, he took all of his life's work, thousands and thousands of these paintings, took them to a crematorium, and burned them all. And in that moment, he decided to make a change and made a piece of this long film of him repeatedly writing the statement, "I will not make any more boring art. I will not make any more boring art." He then went on to become one of these seminal artists of the 20th century, redefining visual conceptual art and influenced an entire new generation of artists that have come since. So a couple years ago, I was at a similar place, at a similar age, and my startup had been acquired. I was living a nice, cushy tech job, managing product teams, but I couldn't help but feel that I'd kind of lost my way a little bit. So I decided in that moment to quit and just jump into the one thing that I thought was really interesting in the world of software, which was video games. Now, video games have kind of been this sneaker sort of category behind the scenes in software that we haven't really followed that much. But they've actually been the driving force for a lot of progress over the last decades. So there's some of the obvious things that we know, like graphics, right? Video games look amazing. But it's also some things that we don't recognize or acknowledge as much, things like collaboration. You know, Figma's multiplayer itself was inspired by MMOs, right? Like World of Warcraft. Not just that, things like onboarding. Video games have shown that like you can take a game like Breath of the Wild, which has tens of thousands of moves and weapons and economies that you need to learn, and it can take hundreds of hours to do that. And yet at the same time, a 5-year-old can pick up the controller and start playing it right away. And that's very rare. Like, we don't really tend to see that in the world of products. As well as things like stories. Some of the best stories now are actually being told through video games. Things like business models, in-app purchases were pioneered in video games. Digital goods like skins, season passes, things like this. Even things like AI, right? This stuff has actually been percolating in video games for decades with NPCs and generative systems. On top of that, every kid is kind of a gamer now. Most kids, their first experience with software is actually through video games. So you might say that the future of software and products might actually look a lot like video games. So I started to feel that and then started to think, okay, what could I take from game design and bring into the product world? And where would you start? Well, why not start with something that we use every day, right? Which is a weather app. And this is the same app. I use the same app that 2 billion other people use, right? It's a fine app, not particularly inspiring. But I think importantly, I didn't choose this app. Not like the other things in my daily life that I consciously choose. This is something that was just the default, right? I just kind of fell into it. And it's okay. It's a little complex. That screen goes for another 4 screens or so of charts and stuff. So you kind of have to piece together the weather. And the truth is that, the weather is very complex. There's hundreds of data points, all spread out over time. And it's a lot to work with. So what most apps do is they take all those data points and they try and simplify it down to a single weather code. So that what that means is the weather becomes, it's partly cloudy, or it's rainy, or it's windy, right? The problem with that is that weather can be all of these states at the same time, right? And so we asked, okay, is there a better way to represent the true weather without adding a ton of complexity to it? Turns out video games do this sort of thing all the time, right? And they tend to do this through simulations. They take a lot of data points and pull it into a simulation. So we thought, let's do the same thing. What if we built a weather app like a video game, procedurally generated models, then use things like real-time physics and real-time dynamics to pull it all together. So what that means is the cloud coverage is no longer just 3 discrete states. It's not just clear, partly cloudy, or cloudy. We can actually take the percentage of cloud coverage, so you can tell the difference between 73% and 72%, and we generate the cloud model in real time. Things like precipitation, right? We drop in a particle emitter. We can actually emit the number of particles relative to the rainfall rate. So the faster or the more it rains, the faster it drops, the heavier the drops, things like that. And then the fun thing is when you start to combine them. So now we can add a force field to the world and actually blow the particles sideways. So now you can see how strong the wind is blowing and what direction it's blowing. So you can already read like multiple data points at once in one visualization. Then we start to add all sorts of fun little details, like raindrops splashing, a lot of fun little animations that kind of cue you in as to what the precipitation is. Is it hail? Is it snow? Is it rain? Add some fun sounds, why not? And then we pull it all together and you get this one very simplified view that's actually very accurate, very informed with all these different data points. And then we create this timeline at the bottom that you can actually scrub through like a video. So you can see at any point in the future what the weather is going to look, feel like. So all this means that you're not really reading the weather so much as hopefully you're feeling it. You're getting all those data points in one very quick view. Then we thought, okay, what else can we do here? What else can we take from video games? We love this idea of skins. Again, we're all using the same weather app, so what do we do there? We built this whole skinning system so that now the weather app can take on many different looks based on who you are and what you want. We work with a lot of artists to put some of these together. Then we thought, well, what if you want to go deeper into the weather, right? What if you want to learn a little bit more about it? So we built what we call the exploded view. And this is very much inspired by video games, the inventory screen specifically, where you pause the action, and then you get a chance to dive in and really explore everything in like minute detail and really geek out over it. So we thought, hey, that's the best way to introduce a lot more data into the weather app. So we start prototyping the interaction in Blender, just looking at the animation, how things might blow apart and then come back together, how you might cycle through them. And then we put it together in this. So you tap on it, you zoom into whatever aspect of the weather that is, you get a chance to scrub through the timeline, you get a visualization of that over time. At any point, this big 3D visualization sort of shows you, what's happening in the weather. So you can see cloud coverage, you can see things like direction that the wind is blowing at 5 o'clock later today, stuff like that. And the fun thing about working this way is all the happy accidents that kind of just come along with it. And so, we had someone reach out saying, hey, that's really thoughtful that you put that little red highlight on the text there. And that wasn't intentional, of course. We just had a light object inside the sun, and it happened to spill out and hit the text. And these sorts of things really happen all the time in 3D. We get all sorts of fun, crazy mistakes. A lot of times they're just fun snapshots to share or to save for later. But sometimes, it sort of reinforces this idea that you want to play with your tools, and get a chance to see what a tool can do for you. A lot of times, a tool is not just there to help execute what's in your head, but help you shape it. So one time, textures didn't load on our number models. And we just stopped and we were like, that looks kind of interesting, right? That wireframe itself looks pretty interesting. So we made a skin out of it, right? And we even have the little 3D gizmo, XYZ gizmo there in the middle. And we loved that so much that we made a whole series of these debug mode skins. So wireframe, depth map, and normal maps. So the other fun thing with that we decided to kind of pull from gaming is this idea of surprises. So, you know, on special occasions, we can pop up special models to just surprise people, right? Why not give them a little surprise along the way? We even built something along the line of challenges in. So we give you a little hint. Don't really tell you what it's about. But if you spin the numbers here really fast, you actually unlock a free skin. You can all do this if you want. Just don't tell anyone else. We decided, hey, why not just go all the way? Let's make a mini game in the app, right? So if you actually pop all of the clouds in the scene, you'll trigger a mini game called Cloudburst, where you have to pop as many clouds as you can within a certain time frame. So all these things like this, you know, it's about rewarding curiosity. So you're rewarding your players or your users for exploring your app, and it means that you don't have to do as much instruction to tell them what to do. So, you know, what is all this? I was trained in a very kind of classical design sense with a lot of these principles. Faster, easier, simpler. But, you know, it's not really these things, right? And the more we started to dig in, we're like, okay, this feels like software not really to save time, but to savor it. You know, we get so caught up in how we optimize the number of clicks and things like that, we sort of often tend to lose the bigger picture, right? So then we moved on to our next app, and we thought, hey, let's build a habit tracker. This is something that people do every day, or need to do every day if they're building a new habit. The challenge with habits is no surprise. It's hard to change human behavior. 91% of New Year's resolutions fail before the end of January. So it's really hard. So we're not really building a tracker so much as a builder, right? And we thought, again, what can we take from behavioral science and combine with video games? And the science part is not that complicated. You just need to do something enough times for it to stick. So it turns out to be about 60 times, which is more than most people think. But you just have to do it a lot, and then combine it with what we know that we can get from video games. And anyone here who has young kids knows that if you need to get your kid to do something that they don't want to do, what do? Turn it into a game, right? So we thought, what better mechanism than to get people to do what they don't want to do than to turn it into a fun challenge, right? And of course you can do the achievements, the rewards, you can do that sort of thing, but we actually wanted to focus on something a lot simpler. Turns out that one of the most satisfying moments of accomplishing something is also the simplest. It's just crossing that item off the list, right? So satisfying, feels so great. The problem with most habit trackers today is that moment essentially looks like this, right? It's just a default checkbox. So we asked, what would the most satisfying checkbox that you could possibly build look like? So it led us into this area of game design called game feel. And game feel is essentially the aesthetic sensation of control. It's how something feels like as you're using it. If you think about a game like Mario here, yes, the goal is to beat Bowser and free the princess, right? That's the uber goal. That's the sort of thing that we would think about, I think, in the product world. But the truth is, moment to moment, what are you doing with Mario? You're running around, you're doing flips, you're rolling, performing these acrobatic moves. Like, that's really the experience of playing Mario. It's what it feels like. And if that didn't feel right, you wouldn't play it. You wouldn't play it through to reach the goal, right? And it turns out, no surprise, that the team that built Mario spent years refining these mechanics, right? So we thought, okay, what if we apply those same principles to this checkbox? This is what the checkbox looks like now. Well, let's make it a little bit bigger, first of all, because it's a little small. This is the one thing you're doing in the app, by the way, is just hitting a checkbox, right? So why not make it a little bit bigger? Let's model it up in 3D, make it a little bit more tactile for people. Let's create some animations that help us get from state to state that we need. Let's create this build animation to try and like build some anticipation. The gesture itself is a long press gesture, so it's not just, it can't just be accidentally triggered by a quick tap. It makes it reversible, other things like that. We have this burst animation that once you actually trigger it, pop, you get this fun explosion of color. And then we love sound, so let's put some sound design behind it that follows this action with a sort of lead up, punctuation, and sustain. And then let's do some custom haptics too, right? Like let's make sure that you can feel it as well. So this sounds like a lot, but we added probably 4 or 5 other things that I'm not even mentioning. And this is probably a fraction of what games tend to add. But what it means is when you start to pull it all together, you can go from something like this, which is the basic checkbox, to something a little more exciting, like this. A little more celebratory, right? So basically, with our Habits app, what you do is you pop open the app every day, you check off your habit, and you progress actually along a series of levels along this journey. Tells a story. It's a lot of fun. You got to try it. But one thing that we did is that in the background of each of these levels, we're actually playing some generative music. Just very basic logic. Every second, we pick a random note and just play it back. And the funny thing is that we started to get a lot of messages like this. Are you guys on Spotify yet, right? It's like, I had to like ask him a few times, wait, what, are you sure you're talking about this music? And someone even said, wow, I had the most productive work session I've ever had just having your app open right there. And it's like, okay, all right. But that led us to our next app that we call Vibes. It's a focus music app. And music is great for focus. It's actually one of the few techniques proven to improve like memory retention and duration of focus. But the challenge with music is that often it's distracting if it's not designed right? It can be very repetitive. It doesn't really understand your context, and there's not really a ton of control over what you can do. You know, you can change the song, sure, but you can't change aspects of the music. So again, we turn to our friend, the video games. And video game music is incredibly sophisticated, we came to learn. It not only plays different music based on areas and understands your context, but things like this, if you start to engage with an enemy, the music changes, kicks into a higher tempo, and it's actually designed to like increase your adrenaline and help you focus. So we loved that idea, and we thought, how about a video game soundtrack for your life, where you are the protagonist, right? It's really hard to build good generative music, we found, but we came up with this model that creates a bunch of banks of sound files. We have over 1,000 sound files that we created. Sequence those into melodies, and then mix those into tracks, and then they kind of seamlessly, mix over the course of a day. And so we took all that idea into this old programming language called Max from the 90s. Turns out all the best music software is from the 90s. And what it's doing is it's pulling in a bank of samples, and it's using some random logic set to a certain rhythm. And we have some like a chance value in there that you can mess with, and it sort of increases or decreases the complexity of the music, things like that. So we started to feel good about the music that we could create. Then the question was, okay, how do we actually show this music, right? How would a user actually navigate this? And found some inspiration in this music video from Michel Gondry for a song called Star Guitar from a few years back. And it's not super apparent at first, but what's actually happening is everything in the scene is being generated by the music. So like a kick drum or a snare hit or a keyboard hit, each of those is mapped to a different item. So you might see like a lamppost or a building or a train. All that stuff is appearing in scene based on the music. So we loved that idea and thought, okay, maybe there's something we can take there. I put together this quick sketch of something of a treadmill, I guess, but this idea that you could generate music and move through a space infinitely, right? So we take it into Blender, start to prototype it, start to see what this might look like, made it into more of a planet form, and just started to populate it with different things, get a sense for, okay, what's it going to feel like to kind of move through this? Is that going to feel interesting? We liked what we were doing here and started to bring it into SceneKit, which is game engine, and just start generating music and just start generating the scene at the same time to see, okay, is there something here? Like, okay, yeah, that's pretty interesting. So we were feeling good about that, and now we wanted it to be very contextual to you. So actually what we do is we take your sleep and wake times and we map it to a common circadian rhythm. So, you know, if you're waking up in the morning, we can play music that helps you get up, or if evening time, it can help you calm down. Focus time, we can help you focus. So what it means is literally the simplest app that we thought we could build, which is, it's one tap. You open the app and it's playing. So it's playing music based on the time of day. So if you're working, it's playing focus music. If you're trying to calm down in the evening, it's like playing some nice soothing music to calm you down. And then the other thing is it's responsive. So if you get up and start moving, it actually increases tempo. So it kicks up into a higher speed to kind of match your tempo there. And then we added some control to it. So you can swipe to speed it up if you just need a little boost in the moment. Or if you want deeper focus, you can actually pinch it back and kind of zoom back. It pushes all the music into the background. And then we built multiple worlds, right? So all these different vibes that we call them have different worlds that come along with them. Everything's very interactive. You can tap everything. Fun little creatures. You can see the little creature there that pop up out of nowhere. Had a lot of fun with it. So again, I think we were sort of faced with this question, like, well, why are we doing these things? And I'll be the first to admit that really the goal hasn't really been to make a better weather app. I'm a big believer that software is really the strongest force that's shaping culture today. Each one of us here, like, we have the power to just shape culture in ways that we've never, like, creative people have never really had that crazy power before. Like, anyone here can make an app in a few weeks, put it out there, and instantly, like, millions of people are impacted by it, right? I feel like we should feel very lucky to have stumbled into this. And then there's this idea that, we have to get past this idea that the software we build is just about solving problems. We have this concept that, we use the software as a tool to solve a problem, and then we put it down to get back to regular life, right? The challenge is that, software is in regular life too. Software is everywhere, right? There's no regular life to return to, right? It's the air that we breathe. It's the water that we swim in at this point. So we're not just solving problems anymore. We're making these moments that we're living day to day. If that's the case, if we really want to live like a very full and rich life, like we have to make the software that's as rich and as diverse and as meaningful as those lives that we want to live. So with that, I will not make any more boring software. Thank you.